Okay, so get this right. This past week in politics, it's been nuts. Like riding a roller coaster, but,
It
blindfolded.
sounds intense.
It is. We've got all these news articles here, and they paint like a really wild picture.
Oh, really? Like what?
We're talking trade wars, government shakeups, international incidents, you name it.
Wow. And I heard Elon Musk is involved somehow too.
Oh, yeah, he's right in the middle of it all.
Okay, well, let's dive in. Where do we even start with all of this?
Well, I guess we should start with Trump, right? He kicked off his second term by slapping tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China all in the same week.
Right, right. He said it was all about protecting American jobs and getting a handle on immigration.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But those tariffs, they really show you how connected the global economy is. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, the reaction was immediate. Canada and Mexico, they hit back with their own tariffs.
And they targeted stuff that would really hit American consumers, like whiskey and cosmetics. Ouch.
Yeah, it was strategic. And it wasn't just the economics either. Remember all that cultural backlash?
Oh, yeah. Canadians were booing the U.S. national anthem at, like, hockey games and stuff.
Yeah.
And Prime Minister Trudeau, he was all over the news telling Canadians to buy Canadian.
Yeah, yeah. It was pretty wild to see. Like, could you imagine walking into a store and all the American products are just gone?
It'd be pretty weird.
Yeah. It really made everyone think about where the stuff we buy actually comes from.
For sure. So do we think these tariffs actually worked? Like, was it all part of Trump's plan, some kind of negotiation tactic? Or was this a real policy shift?
Well, after a few very tense days, Trump agreed to put those tariffs on hold for Canada and Mexico.
Really? So did they cave?
Well, in exchange, they promised to, ramp up their border security.
So a little give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of experts are saying the U.S. didn't get a whole lot out of the deal.
Interesting. And of course, those tariffs on China, those are still happening.
Oh, yeah, those are still in full effect. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Totally. Okay, so while all that trade war stuff was going on, things were also getting pretty crazy on the home front. Like, remember when Trump put Elon Musk in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency?
Oh, man. That was a huge surprise. I mean, putting someone from the private sector, especially someone like Elon Musk, in charge of the government.
Talk about shaking things up.
It was a bold move, to say the least.
And it happened so fast, right? Musk comes in and immediately announces that he's found, like, $700 billion in government waste and fraud.
Yeah, $700 billion. No one saw that coming. And everyone is wondering, how is that even possible?
Right. Where was all this waste? Like, it was mind-boggling.
Totally. And then, to make matters worse, Musk was granted access to all these super sensitive Treasury payment systems.
And the Democrats, they were not happy. They saw it as a blatant power grab.
Rightfully so. I mean, you've got Elon Musk with all this influence and no real accountability.
It was a recipe for disaster.
It was. And the federal worker unions, they filed a lawsuit immediately trying to block his access.
They weren't messing around.
They weren't. And then there's that whole USAID thing, which is still hard to believe even happened.
I know. I still can't believe Musk actually bragged on social media about feeding USAID into a wood chipper.
Oh, man. That was something else. How do you even respond to that?
I know.
No.
And of course, not long after that, we see thousands of USAID employees being laid off and all these programs being shut down around the world.
Yeah. I mean, the goal was to streamline the government, right? But the way he went about it, it was so abrupt and the impact was huge.
It made a lot of people wonder if it was truly about efficiency or something else was going on.
For sure. And it really makes you think about the role of the government. What are the essential functions? What are the priorities?
Yeah. Deep stuff.
Yeah.
Speak of controversial firings, we've got to talk about Rohit Chopra.
Oh, right. The director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yeah, the CFPB.
Yeah.
Trump got rid of him, and Chopra was a real thorn in the side of the financial industry.
He was. He was always pushing for stronger consumer protection, which didn't make him very popular with some folks.
He definitely ruffled some feathers.
He did. But for a lot of people, getting rid of him was seen as a win for the financial industry, but a loss for consumers.
It definitely sparked a debate about who's really in charge and whose interests they're serving,
Absolutely. Is the government there to protect the people or to protect big businesses? It's a question that's always being asked.
A good question. And then, to add to all this tension, you had FBI agents actually suing the Justice Department.
Yeah, that was wild. They were trying to block them from releasing the names of agents involved in those Trump investigations.
Like the January 6th riot and that whole Mar-a-Lago documents situation.
Exactly. Those agents, they were worried about retaliation, especially with everything so politically charged.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be worried.
Especially with Trump's history of going after people he thinks are against him.
It's a legitimate concern for sure. And then on top of all that, we had massive protests all over the country.
Oh, yeah, those were huge. People were really fired up about those planned deportations.
I mean, they even shut down a major freeway in Los Angeles. It was intense.
It definitely showed that people were not just going to stand by and watch.
It was like everyone was on edge, just waiting to see what crazy thing was going to happen next.
It was a wild week, that's for sure.
And that's just what happened here in the U.S. Things were just as dramatic on the international stage.
Oh, I bet. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, how about Trump suggesting that the Palestinians displaced in Gaza should be, quote, permanently resettled?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that raised some eyebrows around the world.
That's an understatement. It was a big change from how the U.S. usually handles that conflict.
It definitely was. People were worried about what it meant for peace negotiations and the stability of the whole region.
And then in the middle of all that, he goes and meets with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, that was a significant meeting, especially with the timing.
Right. Netanyahu is actually facing an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court.
It was wild.
And of course, Netanyahu is praising Trump for, helping get a hostage released and a ceasefire.
Yeah, that was definitely a win for both of them. And, while they were together, they also talked about Iran.
Of course they did.
Netanyahu was really pushing Trump to do more about Iran's nuclear program, which is always a sticking point between them.
Makes sense. It's like this big geopolitical chess game.
Right.
Every move has these huge consequences.
Exactly. And then to add to the drama, we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio basically giving Panama an ultimatum.
Oh, about the Panama Canal.
Yeah, he told them they needed to cut down on China's influence around the canal or the U.S. might have to step in. He even hinted that the U.S. might want to take back control of the canal.
Whoa. That's a pretty bold statement. I mean, the Panama Canal is a huge deal for both countries.
It is. It shows that the U.S. is really worried about China getting more powerful on the world stage.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, Trump pulls the U.S. out of the World Health Organization.
The WHO. Wow.
Wow. He accused them of messing up their response to the pandemic.
Oh, wow. That's a huge deal.
It is. A lot of people were really worried about what that meant for global health and cooperation.
The WHO even asked other countries to, pressure the U.S. to come back, saying they'd miss out on important information.
So that's the whirlwind tour of the past week in politics. Trade wars, government shakeups, international incidents, and a whole lot of controversy.
Phew. That's a lot to take in. What stands out to you the most?
I mean, it's all connected, right?
Mhm.
These decisions here in the U.S. affect the whole world. The economy is tied to culture and politics. It's all intertwined.
It really is. And it all just makes you think,
About what?
about power, about who has it and how they use it. It's like we're living through history in real time, just watching it all unfold.
It's wild, for sure. And the question is, where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's like we're at this crossroads and the path forward is pretty unclear.
Totally. And in the middle of all this, you've got the Democrats trying to figure out how to deal with Trump and all his executive power. It feels like they're hitting a wall,
Yeah, it's a tough spot for them. The Republicans control the Senate, and a lot of them seem to be okay with what Trump's doing, so the Democrats' options are pretty limited. But they are pushing back.
Right, like with those lawsuits we talked about.
Yeah.
The FBI agents trying to protect their identities, the state attorneys general, the nonprofit groups. They're all trying to stop some of Trump's executive orders.
Exactly. Those legal challenges are super important. They're like forcing the courts to step in and decide if what Trump's doing is even legal.
It's like hitting the pause button, right? Making everyone slow down and think.
Yeah, exactly. But the big question is, will Trump actually listen if the courts rule against him?
I mean, he doesn't exactly have the best track record of following the rules, right?
Yeah, that's the worry. And it's not just about legal battles either. We're seeing more and more protests and demonstrations all over the place.
It feels like people are reaching their breaking point.
It does. You've got government workers, activists, regular people. Everyone's coming together to say they've had enough.
It's actually kind of inspiring to see people standing up for what they believe in.
It is. It shows that even when things feel really messed up, people still care enough to fight back. And speaking of fighting back, we've got to talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was a whole other level of crazy. Trump nominating him to be the health secretary. I was like, wait, what?
Seriously, it came out of nowhere. And Kennedy's views on vaccines, they've stirred up so much controversy, even among Republicans.
It's wild, right? You'd think that would be a deal breaker, especially with the pandemic still going on.
You would think,
Yeah.
but somehow he's actually on track to be confirmed. He even convinced a Republican senator who was really against him at first.
It's like Trump has this weird power to sway people. It's kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving. And it shows you how much power he still has within the Republican Party. Like, things are changing. What it means to be a Republican is different now.
It's like a whole new era. And with everything else going on, it's just adding to the chaos. The pandemic's still here. People are scared. They're looking for someone to lead them. And then you throw this into the mix.
It's a recipe for disaster. We need leadership that's based on science and facts, not conspiracy theories. And I'm not sure we're getting that right now.
It's pretty bleak, honestly. We've talked to trade wars, government agencies getting torn apart, international incidents, and now this whole public health mess. It's a lot.
It is a lot to process. And it's easy to lose sight of the big picture when you're stuck in the day-to-day chaos.
So what is the big picture? What's the takeaway from all of this?
One thing that's really clear is that everything is connected. Decisions made here in the U.S. have consequences for the entire world. The economy, culture, politics, they all influence each other.
That's like that butterfly effect thing, right? One little change can have huge consequences.
Exactly. And we're also seeing this big erosion of trust in institutions. It's not just the government, it's the media, scientists, experts. People don't know who to believe anymore.
Yeah, it's like everyone's questioning everything.
Yeah.
And social media is just making it worse.
Totally. There's so much misinformation out there, it's hard to know what's real and what's not. It's a real challenge in the digital age. It's like, how do we even learn to trust again? How do we know what information to believe?
It's a big question. And we can't forget about the Tuskegee Airmen situation.
Oh, yeah, that was messed up. When the Air Force took down those videos from their website.
It was a perfect example of how Trump's obsession with getting rid of diversity programs is affecting everything, even basic American history.
The Tuskegee Airmen, those guys were heroes. They fought for their country even though they faced so much discrimination.
And then their story gets erased, even temporarily. It's like, what's next? What other parts of history are we going to pretend didn't happen?
It makes you wonder who's really in control of the narrative, you know? Who decides what stories we get to hear? It's a good question. History is more than just facts and dates. It's about interpretation, about remembering and understanding. And when people try to rewrite history, it's dangerous.
So with all this happening, the political drama, the economic uncertainty, the social changes, it feels pretty overwhelming, right? Like, where do we even go from here?
It is a lot, but we've been through tough times before. History is full of examples of societies facing huge challenges and coming out stronger on the other side.
So you're saying there's hope?
Definitely. Progress isn't always a straight line. It's messy, there are setbacks, but people always find a way to push for a better future. And that's what gives me hope.
Okay, but it's hard to stay positive when you see stuff like the grant freeze, the attacks on government agencies, everyone losing trust in each other.
I get it. But remember, we're not just watching this happen, we have a choice to make. Do we sit back and let it happen, or do we try to do something about it?
So what can we do? It feels like anything we do is just a drop in the bucket.
Even small things make a difference. It could be staying informed, talking to your elected officials, supporting organizations, fighting for what you believe in.
Like just being an active citizen instead of a passive observer.
Exactly. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's about lots of people doing small things that add up to something bigger.
Okay, but a lot of people feel powerless, like their voice doesn't matter. What do you say to them?
Everyone's voice matters. History is full of stories of ordinary people coming together and changing the world. It doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. Start small. Talk to your neighbors, volunteer, donate to a good cause.
Find your own way to make a difference.
Exactly. Every little bit helps.
Okay, that's good advice. But with all the stress and bad news, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. How do we deal with that?
That's a good point. It's important to take care of yourself, too. It's easy to get sucked into the news and social media all the time, but yeah, take breaks.
Like a news detox or something.
Exactly. Give yourself some time to just disconnect and recharge. Spend time with people you care about. Do things you enjoy, whether it's reading, music, yoga, being outside, whatever makes you feel good.
I like that. Self-care is important.
It is. You can't help others if you're burned out yourself.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to reach out for help if you're struggling. Therapists, friends, family, They're there for you. You're not alone in this.
That's so true. So with everything going on, where can we find hope? What keeps you going?
Honestly, the thing that gives me the most hope is seeing how resilient people are. We've been through tough times before, and we always find a way to keep going, to keep fighting for a better future, especially young people. They're demanding change. They're not afraid to dream big.
They're not jaded yet.
Exactly. And there are so many amazing people and organizations out there working every day to make things better, fighting for climate justice, for equality, for a fairer world.
Like, they're not waiting for someone to give them permission. They're just doing the work.
They are, and they're the ones who give me hope. It's a reminder that even small actions can make a difference.
So even though things feel pretty messed up right now, you're saying there's still a reason to be optimistic.
I think so. We have the power to change things, but we have to do it together.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? Like, where do you even begin to make a difference when everything feels so huge?
It is overwhelming, that's for sure. But I think it's important to remember that a lot of people are feeling this way, trying to make sense of everything. And that's why these conversations are so important, to connect and realize that even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. What should we be looking out for in the next few weeks, months? Like, what's going to tell us if things are getting better or worse?
Well, I'd say definitely keep an eye on those court cases about Trump's executive orders.
Right.
The courts are going to have to decide how much power he really has, and that'll affect everything about how the government works.
Like those lawsuits about the grant freeze and, when Chopra got fired from the CFTB.
Exactly. Those could really set a precedent. And, it's not just about what happens in court. We need to watch how people react.
The protest, you mean?
Yeah. Will they keep growing? Will they actually change anything?
Yeah.
And how will the government respond?
And will they stay peaceful? Things could get out of hand quickly, right?
That's definitely a worry. It really shows how important it is for people to be responsible, both the people in charge and the people protesting.
It's tough balance, making your voice heard, but not letting things get out of control.
It is. And it all comes back to having those tough conversations, even with people you disagree with.
Listening to each other, trying to understand.
Exactly. Building bridges instead of walls, as they say, which is definitely not always easy. But if we want a fairer world, we have to at least try.
You're right. So we've got the court battles, the protests. Anything else we should be paying attention to?
Well, we haven't even talked about all the cultural changes happening at the same time.
Like what?
Things like the push for diversity, more people realizing how serious climate change is, even how work is changing.
Oh, right. All that stuff.
Yeah, all of that is reshaping our society in a big way. And it's all tied to politics, but in ways that are hard to predict.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out what America is supposed to stand for now, what our values are.
It's like a fault line running right through the middle of everything.
Whoa. And a reminder that progress isn't always easy, right?
Definitely. There are always going to be setbacks. But even with all the craziness, I still have hope.
Really? What gives you hope?
The young people, mostly. The way they're demanding change, not afraid to challenge things, coming up with new ideas. It's inspiring.
They're not jaded yet.
Exactly. And there are so many people, organizations working hard every day to make things better. Fighting for climate justice, equality, fairness, all the things we've been talking about.
And they're not waiting for permission, right?
Yeah.
They're just getting it done.
Exactly. That's what gives me hope. It's a reminder that we all have the power to do something, to make a difference.
Okay, but what about everyone else? Like people who aren't activists or politicians, what can they do?
Stay informed, be engaged, support the causes you believe in, talk about these issues even when it's uncomfortable, stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Be the change, right?
Exactly. And remember, even small things can make a difference. An act of kindness, helping someone in need, it all adds up.
So it's not hopeless.
Definitely not. We're not alone in this. We have each other, we have communities, and we can work together to create a better future.
Wow. That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with more analysis, trying to make sense of it all. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and don't lose hope.